Okay. Oops, let me set the timer again. There we go. All right. Do students with special needs attend college or vocational school or some other training? So here's some information about that. Yes, they do. The short answer is yes, but it depends on the type of service need or the type of disability that the student has. So certainly any student with LD, learning disabilities, can attend college. And you may know, of course, that at Sandhills Community College, if we have documentation that a student has learning disabilities, specific learning disabilities, then our Office of ADA can help the student get accommodations within the classroom. So a student might get a note taker, or they might get untimed tests, or they might take their tests in a quieter space if they, have ADHD. So lots of students attend a four-year school, or a technical school, or a vocational training program. So this is, their education can really continue after they leave high school if there's a really good match between, their capabilities and interests and a training program. Let's see. In my notes, I'm at that place where, there needs to be a discussion about encouraging students to at least complete high school, and how if a student completes high school, then, it just hugely increases their potential to receive employment and keep employment. Let's see. What do community college-based programs offer students with disabilities? What do community college-based programs offer students with disabilities? So, of course, Sandhills Community College is one of those places, and if we had been in class together, this would have been one of our field trips to go down and visit the Career and College Readiness Program, or College and Career Readiness Program, that's in the first floor of Van Dusen. And you would have been able to talk with students and talk with their teachers and learn a little bit about how their day is. But that's a very structured and wonderful program that people are actually in line to get in. Unfortunately, there really aren't enough slots for these kinds of community college programs as there are students to participate in them. So usually in these community college programs, the student receives a combination of college level classes or college-based classes, and then they also get trained in what is called functional skills. And we've talked about this the whole semester, understanding what functional skills are. One of the cool things about these students coming to the community college campus is that they receive transportation, which is a key thing, right? They can't drive themselves usually, but they're also in a more age-appropriate setting. And so they're among other young people, young adults, who want to be sort of like college students. And so they get to come to a campus. I'm sure you've seen them walking over to our cafeteria, and they, eat in our cafeteria. They buy their own food if it's possible for them to do that. When we have Spring Fling and Fall Festival or any kind of SGA-sponsored fun events on campus, they are able to participate in those. And so in a community college-based program, students get this wonderful, exposure to being on a college campus, which is really neat and fun for them. Let's see. And I just wrote in my notes that Sandhills Community College is pretty great at this, and I do think Sandhills is really great at this. Our staff and our other students who attend Sandhills, I think, get pretty quickly acclimated to the fact that we have students with some types of disabilities on our campus, and that they are participating in things, they're visible, they're not just locked up in a classroom and, opening up their packed lunch and eating by themselves and not participating in anything. I think there's a big effort to help these students at Sandhills really get integrated to the best of their ability. There are some ways of preparation for students who might want to attend post-secondary school, and this discussion is on page 507 of your text. It does include some information about how, many people feel that the preparation that these students are getting in high school for them to go on to be able to be in a college environment, if you will, is not rigorous enough. And so special ed teachers themselves say this about their training programs in the high schools, their transition training programs. They say themselves, when questioned in research studies, we know that our students need much more rigor for understanding what a college classroom is going to be like, and we don't feel like we're giving that to them completely. So this is just something I think for us to be aware of as we have this discussion about this type of student possibly, finding themselves actually on a college campus and maybe even in a, vocational or technical program. Absolutely, they could be doing that. So what can employment look like for these students? Well, as I've mentioned to you before, the earlier in the student's educational life they get exposed to things like that kind of are work habits, positive work habits, the sooner and earlier they can get this kind of training, the better for them. So I don't just mean students knowing how to keep a schedule or punch into a time clock or to know when it's appropriate to take a break. These are kind of functional work behaviors. But there is a whole other family of functional work behaviors that these students need training in, and that has to do with their social behavior, so they know how to use, even it gets so detailed, this kind of training, this social and behavioral training gets so detailed that they even help students understand, how much to talk, maybe how much to disclose in a work environment, or how much hand gesturing to use, or what kind of body language they should use. So this gets really down into the very good details of behaviors that these students can be taught that will help them fit in at work. And it makes me think about my sister Susie, who is not a young person. She's a middle-aged person with mental illness. I've talked about her with you before, and the fact that she works at Taco Bell. I think I've described that to you. And my sister Susie is a person with schizophrenia, so she's smart. She keeps her own money. She lives in her own apartment. She does suffer from paranoid schizophrenia that is controlled with medication. But when she goes to the job, her behaviors need to be as appropriate as they can be. So I have noticed when I visit her that she has this kind of rocking behavior. When we go to a restaurant and she's sitting down, she will be doing this. And that is a behavior that is unusual. It is, quirky. And if she was doing that while she was standing at the register at Taco Bell, it might make the customer feel uncomfortable, or it may make her coworkers, make fun of her or tease her. And so, someone who would have been working with my sister Susie and noticing that rocking behavior would try to help her control that or find some other way to manage whatever it is that she's managing by doing this rocking behavior. It is interesting to know that this kind of behavior does need to be attended to and trained out of these clients if it's possible to do so. So I've talked about what pre-employment can look like, and the idea that the earlier all of this can start, the better. And certainly it needs to start by junior high school. And the reason I'm saying that is because studies seem to support that if students are getting a little extra exposure to employment habits, positive employment behaviors in junior high, then they just have higher gains, and actually research shows that they do a better job retaining employment as an outcome if they've had some of this junior high training. So it just shows that this kind of training is effective for them and meaningful for them. Let's see. Getting to competitive employment. So this is a whole different category, and it's interesting, I think, that the book addresses students such as this being in what is called competitive employment. And competitive employment just means that they're taking up a job that any other person doesn't have disabilities could take up. So again, I'll take us back to my sister Susie, who is, she's working at the register at Taco Bell. Well, any adult who's typically developing could be having her job and getting paid the same rate, hourly rate, wage, as my sister Susie. You may know, or I don't know if you've even thought about this, but depending on how severely impaired this young adult is in transition services, they may not ever work in what we think of as competitive employment. They may actually, at the lowest levels of functioning, need to be in what's called sheltered work. And as I go through these levels of employment that special needs students find themselves in after graduating, they kind of go down in terms of being exposed to the community or level of independence. So competitive employment would be the highest level, right? Let's see. I have mentioned to you, this is in my notes, that each student like this needs to earn at least minimum wage or be paid the same as typically developing young workers. You know what, I just think I heard the camera turn off. I'm going to double check it. Nope, it's still going. Okay, still going. I don't want to record to the empty camera. So, this level of competitive employment would be probably what most people would want their children to aspire to if they have not heavy barriers to achieving it. And let's see, I do have some information in my notes about better transition training in high schools can lead to this level of competitive employment, but these are the things that need to be for sure included in this transition training at the high school level. So I'm going to read to you some bullets. They need specific instruction on the required job skills. So, for example, if a student works at a bakery and they're doing a very specific thing, maybe they are putting onto the baking trays the pieces of croissant or muffins that are going to go into the oven, they need very, very specifically analyzed, like a task analysis done in this so that they can be very successful and know exactly every step that's supposed to be included. So that particular piece needs to be very, very well honed and trained into the student. They need practice in the community in a real employment site as early as they possibly can. This helps them just not see an employment site at the end of high school as this whole new big area that they're going to be turned out into. I can sort of imagine the level of anxiety that might produce for a young adult. So they need to be in the community as much as possible as early as junior high. They need to learn how to raise their production rates. So as you might imagine, students like this, depending on their level of impairment, are probably slower working students than people who are more typically developing adults who are working at a job site. So going back to that situation I created for you in your mind about working at a bakery, a student without impairments or a young adult without impairments is probably going to be kind of pretty much pick up on these employment tasks and get trained up and understand every step of their job within a couple of weeks. And then be able to do actually production that's pretty quick and swift. A person with special needs as an employee is going to, require longer to learn the exact nature of all of these steps, right? We know that it takes them longer to learn. They might need prompts or video prompts or prompts on their phone or alarms or other kinds of supports that way to be able to stick with the job and keep their concentration on the task. And then, they definitely just need to try to be able to increase their speed. And so somebody who's their boss at one of these work sites might need some coaching or mentoring from the teacher, the special ed teacher, in ways to require the student to incrementally get a little faster at their production rate. Not so much so that they can't do it, but also that there is an expectation level for them, that they would increase their production level. This is important. Here are some other examples of employment structures, and I think actually my timer is going to go off in just 5 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the camera and start another clip.